Hello, this is a demo of the Peformalist tool available at peformalist.com. This is a free web tool used to analyze hourly time series data and locate any possible anomalies. The methodology for this tool is available here at the first link if you are interested. If you are interested in just getting to use it though, we have some basic requirements. Your input data should consist of at least 3 weeks of data. The first week will act as your most recent data, while the other 2 weeks will be the baseline that you will be comparing to. However, you want a bigger baseline if possible. This will give you better results. So let's go to an example. Hit the Try It Now button. Now on this screen, we upload the input data. Here we see an example of the data format. It is very simple. We have the date, the hour, and value. Now this value can be anything from a dynamic objects such as a CPU utilization, network traffic, or maybe number of transactions, anything that can be recorded on an hourly basis. For this example, I'm going to use the sample. So let's take a look at it. This is the format you're going to be aiming for. This particular file is 4,514 deep. So let's take a look at what this data actually looks like. So here we go. As you can see, there's some sort of weekly pattern going on here. We've got peaks, valley, peak, valley, peak, valley, etc. based on the day of the week. We have some large peaks here and some lower bounds here. But with this kind of graph, it can be very difficult to tell if you actually have any anomalies. So that's where Peformalist is going to come in. So I'm going to go ahead and upload the file. Press upload. And here we have the graph. Now what we see here are several curves. The x-axis is weekly days and hours. The app has built 168 data points and is displaying the data in a calendar view, starting from Sunday all the way through Saturday. This allows us to see these clear weekly and daily patterns going on. The curve breakdown is done by color, and the legend for it is right here. We have the actual, which is your most recent data. We have the average, which is based off your baseline. We have the upper control limit in green, which is the average plus 3 standard deviations. Obviously, for these to be valid, we are assuming a normally distributed system. We then have the lower control limit, which is in red or pink. That is also the average, but minus 3 standard deviations. Then we also have the upper control limit 95 percentile and lower 5 percentile. This is for when we are not assuming a normal distribution. And finally, we have in black the last hour marker. This is letting you know what the most recent data point is. So the statistics are calculated for every particular hour and weekday. So for example, Monday over here at 11 a.m., the average is calculated across all Mondays that are in the data. So as you can see with this system of presentation, it is much easier to see patterns. All right, now let's look at just the actual and the average. So I'm going to click everything else on the legend to isolate the actual and the average. So let's see. We can definitely see that the actual data is far above the average from the past. This indicates that we most likely have an upward trend going on. Now let's look at the upper control limit. Let's hide that average. So now we're comparing the upper limit with the actual data. So while we may have had an upward trend, we can see that nothing is really that high except for right here. Here our actual data is actually going well above the upper control limit, indicating an anomaly. As you can see, it is much easier to see that when the data is presented in this way. This kind of data will be hard to spot because it's not a global maximum, it's just a local one here. It's not one of these greater peaks. Again, with this system, we are assuming a normally distributed series of data, which is why we are basing the upper control limit on 3 standard deviations. Now, if we assume the data is not normally distributed, in this case we will use the 95th percentile. As you can see, based on the 95th percentile, we get an interesting picture for this day. The data for Tuesday is constantly higher than that upper control limit, 95th percentile. And there's some other spots where that's true as well. So yeah, this data clearly shows seasonality, dips during lunch, and for weekends, as we can see here. So let's also compare some lower control limits. So as we can see with the 3 standard deviation one, we're kind of safe all around the board. The data never really dips very low. There is one important thing to keep in mind. As we can see, the LCL is in reality below 0 here. Now this is complete nonsense, and this lets us know that this data set in reality is not normally distributed, and we should be relying on the 5th and 95th percentile. So if we look here at the LCL5, there's something over here to be said. We're going a little bit lower on this day and maybe a little bit over here. So let's enable everything back up. So finally, also, if you want to play around with this data yourself, you can always look at the table that the app is generating for you, and you'll be able to chart it in whatever way you see fit. And the last hour, again, is just going to be the value, telling you what the most recent point is. This has been a demo made by Arvid of the Peformalist dev team. I hope it's been useful.